La 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 la.
Oh.
Me. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Storyweavers, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything story related.
Here, we'll delve into inspiration, plot, structure, character, and dialogue. Be it in books, movies, music, comics, television, or anything else, we'll be covering it from conception to reception.
We'll be discussing between ourselves as well as with other creators and fans about their experiences, routines, and techniques. Join us and find your next inspiration. We're your hosts, Dean Bradley.
And John William Worth.
And this is Storyweavers. So, do you have snow in Phoenix?
Oh, yes. We got a whole foot of snow. No. We heard that you got, I know that back in Connecticut where I'm from, they're getting like 5 to 10 inches or something today.
Yeah, I think we're expecting 4 to 8 this evening. So whatever this is over, her and Henry will probably head back before, it gets dicey.
Understandable.
Yeah.
We're only expecting a few clouds today at some point.
Oh,
yeah.
Only a few.
Yes. Yeah, it's chilly today. It's in the 40s.
How warm?
Alexa, what's the temperature outside?
Right now, it's 45 degrees Fahrenheit.
45 degrees.
Oh, wow. That
Alexa,
is chilly
stop.
for you. That is chilly for you.
It is. It's freezing. I'm still the idiot who wears like shorts and T-shirts year round.
Yeah.
And the other day when I was coming out of work, one of my coworkers was driving by and she just leans out the window and says, "I know you're not cold, John, but what are you doing?" So, but yeah, no. I miss the weather back east, like what you guys are going to have. I know it's going to be annoying for you guys, but I miss it so much.
Yeah. No, it's nice. It's like our first real snow of the year.
It is,
so
yeah.
far.
Oh,
Yeah.
this late, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it doesn't snow as that much in December.
Anymore.
Yeah.
No.
Global warming.
Oh, no.
Hey guys, welcome back to Storyweavers, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything story related. Today we are joined by Jennifer Lippert here in studio.
Welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, hey Jen, how are you?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Jen is currently the costume shop manager at the Bloomsburg Theatre Ensemble here in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. She's recently worked on productions for Shakespeare's Twelfth Night and A Christmas Story. She has her Bachelor of Fine Arts in Design Technology and Stage Management from Missouri State University's Theater and Dance Department. She has worked with groups such as the Berkshire Theater Group, Stage Door Manor, Gulf Shore Playhouse, and the Weston Playhouse Theater Company. She is currently working with BTE on their upcoming production of Martina Mayock. Am I saying that right? Mayock?
I actually don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay,
So.
I looked it up. I think it was Mayock. Martina's Sanctuary City, which will be premiering, is it January 18th, January 20th?
18th is our first preview, and open is truly 20th.
All right. So if you are in the central Pennsylvania area, set your calendar for those dates and come out and see Sanctuary City. So yeah. So Jen, let's see. I don't know. John, ask a question.
So, I mean, we'll start with just kind of like a very general question. What is your process when you read the script? What is your process for bringing the costuming to life for any production that you're a part of?
Good question. So obviously, straight off the bat, you read the script, and then depending on what production you're doing, you talk with either like a choreographer if it's a dance piece, or a director if it is a musical or play. Kind of get their input of like how they want this story to be told, what visuals they want to use, colors, textures. And then from there, it's a matter of like finding research or inspiration about either like time period or themes that really like speak to me and the director. And then after that, it's using those images, that research, that knowledge, and then finding the costumes, whether that be finding them through pulling them from stock or buying them and or building them. So
very nice. So, okay, so that also leads me into like two other questions also. The first I'll ask, sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, actually I was based just on the last question. So, you've worked with a number of different theater groups. Is it pretty similar that kind of the direction you're going for is mostly collaborative, even though the director and producers, I assume, probably have most of the inputs? I mean, there's a reason they picked these plays. They probably have ideas in mind of things they want to do. So is it real strict and rigid, or have most of them typically been open to ideas?
Yeah, most are open for collaboration. Others, some have more of a visual that they know and they see, and they're like, I want them in black pants, white shirts, this. While others are like, I'm open.
That's why I hired you.
Yeah, they're just like, whatever you show me, and then we'll go from there. So it definitely varies depending.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I was gonna ask, because I'm always interested to see like how people research when they're like designing something for a film, because I have a background in film or stage plays or however. And since you deal with a lot of time period stuff as well, like Sanctuary Cities take place in 2001. I saw several pictures on your Instagram that are definitely period pieces. How do you usually go about researching such things like the styles, or if you want to include symbolism? Because one thing I wrote down was idle labyrinth. You included a lot of triangles in the designs. Like, how do you go about researching that and deciding?
I mean, it varies from project to project. I always start with a Pinterest board, and that's maybe not like hard research, but that's like visual research. And then from there, I'm like, all right, I've got books in my personal library, but also just reading articles online of like, this is the like fashion of this time. This is how people wore. And then also just general research sometimes of like, for shows that are a little more specific. So like Sanctuary City, it happens post 9/11, like right after 9/11. So diving into like what that means for those characters, but also there's, a couple queer characters in there. So also researching like what that means for them in that time period. They weren't able to get married. They were still like a lot of people were still hiding their sexuality and stuff. So researching different aspects about certain characters in certain time periods is also something that I try to do to make it more realistic and to bring more authenticity. Yes, more authenticity to these people and these characters.
Nice. So it's always very much grounded, not only in the time period, but in the psychology of the characters as well.
Yeah.
Very good. Random question, because I know like Dean asked like, oh, how much input from like the directors. Do you ever have input from the actors?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay.
And that is something that sometimes I ask for, especially if it's a show that is more modern and less period, because they will have more opinions since it is something that everybody knows something about. Everybody wears clothes, so everybody has an opinion about clothes. Now, if I were to put like one of you in a frock coat, you'd be like, I guess this feels great. This is great. Because you've never worn a frock coat before.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if I were to be like, you're wearing a t-shirt and jeans, you would be like, this is my size jeans. These are the cuts that I normally wear.
Right.
So like,
I like boot cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And for those more modern shows, I do anticipate like collaboration between the actors and performers and myself. Because it is something much more of a conversation of like, you know your character probably a little better than I do, but this is how I am portraying it. How do you feel in these clothes? And then also giving them the chance to live and play in the clothes. So like maybe I give them a button-up shirt, but they like roll up the cuffs because that feels natural to them. Or at
Oh,
some
that's
point
good,
during
that's
at some point during the show, maybe they like unbutton it a little bit because they're. I want them to
they're
feel
still acting through with the costumes.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So.
The actors, based on my experience, they love props. They love their costumes. They incorporate everything. So that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
The collaboration element.
So I wanted to ask, so how long have you been involved in theater in general? I mean, I assume that it was something that probably started when you were quite young.
Fairly young, yeah. So I mean, theater in the traditional like play musical aspect, I started doing in high school.
Okay.
A lot of my friends were doing theater. They were doing the acting side, and I was like, maybe not. But let me try doing costumes because I know how to sew. And I was like, sure, that's cool. So I joined and did that.
Okay.
And it obviously stuck.
Yeah. So it didn't start out with any want to act.
No.
Really? No.
Yeah, I did in like elementary school do a play or a musical, whatever. I don't remember most of it, but I did have a line, and I was like, not about it. I did not want to speak, but there I was.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the nice things too, and I'm going to relate it to my like recording studio background, is when it comes to audio engineers, you have audio engineers that like the studio environment, that like being able to redo something if, there's an issue, there's not hard time crunches all the time. And then there are people that thrive on like the live setting where, you've got a show going, you're at the mixing board, you got it, and you're teching guitars, whatever it is, you have to get it right.
Yeah.
So you're like me. You like to be in your studio and you have your costumes ready, you're getting stuff ready for the performance. But once the performance is on, you're like hands off, not much you can do at that point.
Yeah, I prefer that. And that I've gotten that question of like film versus like theater. Like, why do you do theater instead of film? It's that, I mean, it is part of that like live aspect. Like it changes, things happen. Like I do repairs or laundry, but I never want to be on stage. So I do enjoy. If I were to do film, I'm sure I would enjoy that too. But there is a difference in like detail work.
Oh yeah.
And also just like construction of like thinking of like this will get used again. So we want to make sure that like it's alterable again, or it lasts longer than like a day for one shoot. It has to last like a month.
Right. Yeah. And that actually that kind of goes into another topic, and feel free to incorporate it as literal or as much as you want, because I know you do work for a theater group and it can be a sensitive topic. But budget obviously is a big part of running a costume shop, I would assume.
Yes. I have always tried to stay in budget. And it's part of my process of like when I start to like look for costumes, I'm like, all right, I have like a $800 budget versus like $1,000 budget. There is a difference. And so pulling what I can from stock that already exists, much better than like going off and purchasing and or building something. So keeping that in mind, I always try to find options that work best, that are good quality, but for as little as I can spend.
Let's pause real quick. I'm going to see how Henry does if I bring him in here.
Yep.
Hey guys, Dean here. Just wanted to remind you that the January 2024 Book of the Month is A Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers. This 2021 novel is the first part in Becky's ongoing series called Monk and Robot. It was the 2022 Hugo Award winner and is a solarpunk novel about the life of a tea monk on a planet called Panga. It's a story of identity, friendship, and acceptance. We hope you'll join us in reading A Psalm for the Wild-Built this month. It's a short book at only 160 pages, so hopefully it won't take you too long to get through, and you'll be able to catch the episode at the end of January. Now back to our conversation with Jen.
What took you so long?
a whole bottle of water and a monster.
Fair enough. That'll do it.
Yes.
All right. So
And a cup of tea. So,
Ooh, lots of liquid, hydrated.
oh yes. Well, Arizona, even in the winter, you have to stay hydrated.
Fair.
But how are the dogs?
much quieter now. Henry's in here and settling down.
Yeah.
Good. He's calmed.
So
Good.
yeah. Well, we'll see.
Calmer.
See how long it lasts.
Gotcha. Suddenly he
Listen,
jumps up.
I've got treats if I need to like just feed him constantly.
Stay quiet, boy. Stay quiet.
I've done it before.
So like, if I may, because you were talking about like the budgets for
Working
like
it within a budget.
yeah, because it's like all that made me think of a story I heard about like the Halloween movie, the original one, where the budget was so tight that they actually sent all the actors and actresses like Jamie Lee Curtis to like J.C. Penney to just buy clothes off the rack. Like,
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was like it was for affordability, but what it lended the production was a sense of authenticity because it's like, hey, this is what real teenagers living in California or Illinois, where the movie was supposed to take place, this is what they'd really wear.
Yeah.
Right.
So sometimes, at least in my experience, I'm not sure about yours, but it's like sometimes the budget, any restrictions on it actually help the production because it also forces you to be ingenuitive, especially.
And creative, yeah. Like I'm trying to think. I've done shows for very, very small budgets. And I'm pretty sure I've done shows that have just been like completely pulled, or like I have not bought anything or built anything or at least spent money on things. There's been maybe one or two, and granted they've been smaller. But
Are they shows where you already have a decent inventory to work with, though, at least?
usually, yes.
Okay,
Usually a good amount of stock is there and involved.
Because I do know from some previous conversations we've had that you are a banging budget buyer.
Yes.
She loves
I know my
thrift
thrift
stores.
stores. Yeah. Yes. I know my thrift stores, and I know how to alter things to work
Good.
for cheap.
Good.
Yeah.
That's part of the trick. I mean,
Well, let's do this. So
Yes.
So your recent productions, we just did an episode that premiered yesterday, actually, to date when we're recording this episode, on Shakespeare film adaptions. And back in, I think it was either October or November, BTE did a production of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. So walk us through a little bit of that process from script, what it was. You know, had you ever worked on Shakespeare before?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually worked on Twelfth Night previously,
Oh, okay.
which helped
I'll
because
say that's nice. You're already kind of
Yeah.
familiar with it, and then
Very
you're just kind of
familiar.
working
Material.
within the director and producers.
yeah.
Yeah.
And for this production of Twelfth Night at BTE, I hopped in like right in the middle of the process. So the designer was already designing, already building, having stuff pulled. And so all of those conversations of like, this is what we're going for, this is the feel, these are the colors, had already happened. So it was mostly just making sure that everything fit. And then adding like little details for the different characters that they play. But on the previous 12th Night, I was involved in that whole process of like learning the language of 12th Night and kind of, and also using the costumes to help the audience understand
Well, and
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, I'm not personally familiar with Twelfth Night, but his language, as we've said before, it's very flowery. Can be very he can be very descriptive, even if it's not obvious necessarily.
Yeah.
So I assume Shakespeare, just through the text, gives you a fair amount of direction as to what to expect, but still open-ended enough to kind of work within.
Yeah. And for this production of 12th Night, we had these characters playing two different characters. So instead of just being like, you're in this vest in this scene, and now this dress in this other scene, you're using like color and textures of being like, you're in this blue vest for this scene, and now you're in this like red dress to show a change between like characters, but also like in between the two.
That was a pretty popular thing in Shakespeare's time too, as well, wasn't it? A lot of actors would play multiple characters,
multiple roles. Yep.
Yeah, and one of the best ways to differentiate that, especially when you're on a stage, if you're not using microphones, and the actor, even if they're using a different voice, it's still kind of obvious. You have to find a way to tell the audience, like, this is who this character is. You know, and that's every time they come out in every scene where they're wearing a different costume. And that can be tough, I would think.
Yeah, no, definitely color and silhouette is one of the biggest things that we use as like costumers.
So what do you mean
story.
by silhouette? Just kind of the general outline shape of the costume?
Yep. So silhouette, out the shape, the style, whether they're in like a very structured, like hard lines or like soft and flowy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because one of the plays I'm very familiar with is a play called Angels in America. Not sure if, And the same thing, the actors play multiple roles. And one of the interesting things about that play is that there's an HBO miniseries version of it too, and they do the same thing. Like Meryl Streep plays like 4 or 5 different roles. And like what Dean mentioned, and what you mentioned earlier, creating costumes for stage and screen, they're very different because on screen, it's got to be to an extent more convincing because everything's more in close up. There's probably more details involved. Have you ever put details into costumes like on stage that the audience will probably not notice, but you put them in there anyway for the actors or for some purpose?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I like to hide in little details like that. And funny enough, you bring up Angels in America because I have worked on that before.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I've never seen the show, but I have watched I watched the HBO series.
Yeah. Henry. Hey, no, come here.
Oh, we probably just found a goldfish all the way back there.
No.
What's great is all of this is taking place off camera.
Man.
Stay over here, dude. Yeah. Good boy.
So where did you work at? Where did you work on Angels in America?
Angels in America, I actually did it at my university that I went to school at.
Oh, okay.
It was actually my first production. I don't know why they let sophomore Jennifer design the costumes for Angels in America Part 1. But I did. We did.
It's a small production.
Just a small thing. And since it was a university production, we ended up not like double casting those characters. We just used everybody.
Right.
Just got a role so that they could cast more people. However, some of the details, like the small detail stuff that you were talking about, I put in with having like Pryor have like a little brooch that had like feathers on it.
Oh, okay.
And then like his hospital gown, I like painted some little feathers as like a little detail. Cause you know how like sometimes like hospital gowns have those like little patterns in them.
Right. Yeah.
And so I made one with
in.
little feathers just to kind of like sprinkle in like feathers and angel.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
That's cool.
Yeah. Small things like that. But then other times, I know you mentioned Idle Labyrinth, the dance, and having like triangles be part of it. Sassy boy.
Sassy, yeah.
Yes.
Sassy boy. But with like Idle Labyrinth, having shapes of like triangles in different ways and in different forms, whether people notice them or not. I like to throw those in there, even if it's just for me or the actors to create that feeling.
You still have to find a way to put your own mark on things.
Yeah.
You know, that's something we talk about a lot as creatives, and it's usually in the context of like directors or film directors. But I feel like anyone that works on any sort of production, whether it's theater production, film production, you know, there are little things that they put in there that you'll notice on every set they work on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just be like, yeah, I was there.
There's a fun little detail that I like to tell people about. There's a movie called Stardust. If you're not familiar, you should watch
Gaiman.
it.
Oh, okay. I've heard of the book. I know of the book.
It's really good, but I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you've noticed this detail, but the princes, their costumes, some are printed or have buttons of like what son they are. Yeah, what number they are.
Yep.
And that is my favorite little detail.
Oh,
yep.
cool.
Septimus is the seventh son.
And he's got
Oh.
little buttons
7.
with 7 on it.
Oh, yeah.
And then like Primus has a bunch of like Roman numeral number 2s printed into his costume, the fabric. So
That's cool.
things like that that
Yeah.
just you really appreciate.
Right. Exactly. I love like little details like that. Again, just like you said, even if the audience, whether it's film or stage, never notice it, it's just something small, some little trademark or some little trick. This was another question I thought of because I thought of another film that I'd read about. Have you ever heard of a film called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane?
I have not.
No.
So it's from the 60s. It's like a thriller horror film. It starred Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, who were like mortal enemies. And it's basically about 2 sisters, one of whom is bedbound. The other takes care of her, and she's jealous of the one sister's fame. So she like constantly tortures her and everything. And she thinks of herself as like this movie star. So Betty Davis decided to doll herself up quite literally in like pounds and pounds of makeup and like this extravagant dress and a wig. And the reason she did it, she did the makeup herself because she felt like costume designers or like makeup artists, they wouldn't be brave enough to kind of like make her look ugly, essentially. The same thing like with Elizabeth Taylor and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. People were trying to make her look pretty. It's like, no, we want her to look plain and ugly. Have you ever had to do like costuming that's that kind of like different or something that you're thinking like, oh, I'm not sure if this will work?
Yeah. So some costumes are like, you said it perfectly, of like trying to like make someone not look pretty, you know, that it's a constant reminder sometimes to certain actors of like, no, you are supposed to not, you know, have the greatest clothes or whatnot. But then also just trying to like be brave and think outside the box of like, is this going to work? Is this going to read? Is this going to look good? So like what's coming to mind right now is a dance piece that I did about trees. And so I was I was first trying to use like sustainable clothing and pieces to like honor the fact of like earth and trees and not being part of fast fashion. So using things that we had and then sustainable fabrics that were in stock and creating these different silhouettes that were like very flowy but tree-like, long. So just making sure that they looked good. And I was like, we'll see. They look like they might just be draped in fabric, but hopefully it works. And I think it worked out pretty
successful.
well. Yeah.
Good. Sometimes it's the most daring things that work. Like the things you're like, will it? So.
Yeah. It definitely, I find joy in finding those really ugly costumes.
Oh, it's a challenge.
Okay.
Yeah. I also really appreciate those ugly costumes. So if everyone's familiar with Harry Potter.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Very much so.
And the Goblet of Fire.
Okay.
Ron's dress robes.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful. They are
Look
lovely.
like my Aunt Tessie. Smell like my great Aunt Tessie.
I love them.
Yeah.
I love them.
That's your style.
That is, I'd wear those.
Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah. And so people are like, oh my God, those are awful. Those are ugly. And I'm like, no.
They're great.
They're stunning.
They're perfect. They do their job so well.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the big thing. They do their job well and to each their own.
And now, since you're, let's talk about Sanctuary City if you guys want. Are you? Yeah. Because
No,
that is
yes.
Well, just in case you had any more questions or, what we were just talking about. But since you are currently working on Sanctuary City, and we're going to do our best to get this episode out by the time it premieres, let's talk about it. So do you mind just giving everyone who's not familiar with Sanctuary City a little bit of an overview of it, and then we'll get into your work working on it?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. So like overview, we've got these two characters, these two kids, Newark, New
Jersey.
Yeah, Newark, New Jersey. Yeah. Oh, my bad.
I never understood why they put a Newark and a New York so close together. And if you
Just
fly into Newark and like go to New York and you're not from the US and you didn't know there was a difference, like, and you hear the conductor say like arriving in Newark, like you might be in the wrong city.
But you're close enough.
You're so close. Anyway, we've got these two kids growing up just outside the big city post 9/11, and these kids are both from families who immigrated to the US. They were not born in the US, so they were immigrated. But they both deal with the struggles of maybe being there illegally or legally, but not knowing what to do when their time is up. So it's them kind of going through these struggles together and having to deal with family issues, personal issues, schooling, future, all of that stuff. And it sounds like, I don't know, John, did you end up reading it, or did you just read a little blurb about it?
I read a blurb about, mostly read the New York Times review of it, talking about the illegal immigrant element. The opening where I believe like one of the characters climbs up a fire escape. They see the other character, both children of the undocumented immigrants. One of the things, like you mentioned, like the characters are having struggles. They're both young characters post 9/11 of undocumented immigrants. So at the time, probably not very welcome in the United States. I mean, we all lived through that time period. I'm not sure how much of the show you can discuss, so whatever you feel comfortable with, but how did you reflect the characters' struggles in their costuming or even in their makeup if you worked closely with that department?
Yeah. So starting this process, obviously doing some research, but then, but since they are like from they are immigrants and undocumented immigrants, some of them, just being aware of like, they probably wouldn't be shopping at the nicest places, and having those conversations with the actors of like, how do you feel like your character would wear this or that, or like what kind of style would they be wearing of that time period? And being like, oh, my character would be really quiet, wouldn't be bold, wouldn't be flashy. Putting those into costumes, knowing like, all right, this color palette, these kind of textures, this kind of fit, just even having a conversation of being like, oh yeah, we would buy clothes from a thrift store. Like that'd be it.
So they might be a little bit bigger on the kids, or
bigger on the kids, maybe
worn,
not the
colors
best.
faded.
Yeah, maybe a style more like in the 90s than the 2000s, knowing that. But then also just knowing that like they're also trying to fit into this American ideal. So maybe not having something from their like country of origin, like
right,
would be the thing. They are trying to Americanize themselves. So
fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely one thing I would also wonder about is there a mixing of cultures in the costumes? Like they're trying to take their country of origin, and even though they're shopping at thrift stores and stuff, it's like that weird balance between the two. They're trying to keep their identity while shaping a new one.
Yeah. I think, and that's what I was like thinking about at first, and leaning into at first. But thinking about it more, it was a time like the early 2000s, and I can't speak to this necessarily personally since I am not from an immigrant family. I feel like there's community and conversation happening now about like making sure that people hold on to their cultures and making sure that's known now. But I don't know if that was happening back then, and these people were really just trying to like
Well, a lot of them too are moving on from a life that was difficult, and even if there are things about their country that they liked or their people that were there, I mean, a lot of immigrants see America as hopeful and a place where they can kind of get a chance to start over. So but and even in a post 9/11 world, I don't know how much people did talk about it, maybe privately in their own homes, but it's not something that was really a public conversation, I don't think, at that time.
Yeah, and especially post 9/11.
Yeah.
Trying to really just be like, I associate as an American rather than I associate with my other country.
Right.
Right. I mean, I remember at the time, and because I remember I had to write an essay of all things about like the Dixie Chicks at the time because they got all the heat for that comment they made about George Bush. There was that sense of extreme patriotism, like you must be for America. You know, this horrible thing happened. So that was definitely, at least from my early teenage years, that's what I clearly remember that. So the assimilation into that culture makes a lot of sense. Another question I had, because the show had been performed before, because when I was reading it, it was like the New York Broadway premiere, I believe. Yeah. Did past productions of Sanctuary City influence you at all? And do you let previous productions influence you when you're looking at your own designs?
Yes, they can indirectly. And so what I try to do is I try to avoid like past productions sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, let me see what they did for this one moment that's a challenge. Or but usually I try to avoid it so that I don't see it. I'm like, oh, I like that. That looks really good. And then like when I'm designing, I'll be like, maybe I could just do that. So I try to avoid it because it would indirectly kind of influence. So I did see a couple other images from other shows, past productions. But I don't think I let them get to me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, in like contrast to something, say like A Christmas Story, I assume Christmas Story was a film first that was then adapted to the theater.
Yes.
Yeah, so having something like A Christmas Story, and especially something so well known that in the US, you know, is played on most Christmas channels 24 hours on Christmas Day. I really tried to make it to that show, and life happened and it just didn't work out. But like, how traditional to the film were the costumes in Christmas Story versus like being a little bit more original and not trying to take influence, as you were just talking about?
So for a production like that, I'd let that influence me a little more, because it is something that it's like people are expecting to see this.
Right. That's people want to see that. Like, I know you had leg lamps.
Yeah. So we had a leg lamp. We had like the pink bunny suit. We had like the big snowsuit where he can't put his arms down. But as for like other characters and other moments, we had some things that were reminiscent from the film. So like, his friends like Flick and Schwartz had hats that are similar, but maybe not exactly the same and whatnot. So there was some play, and that mostly came down to like budget and what we had in stock and what we could get. But
well, I guess part of the reason you put A Christmas Story on too is for the nostalgia. It's because it's something that people know and will put butts in seats, to put it crudely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas on something like Sanctuary City, hopefully you get butts in seats. That's the goal. But it does let you be a little bit more free and creative, because there aren't those expectations from the majority of the audience, at least. I'm sure you get a lot of people that, you know, do go and are familiar with the plays.
Yeah. And Sanctuary City is a relatively like, I had not heard about it before working on it.
Yeah.
But like other shows, so like going to see like bigger productions of like, you expect certain costumes for Lion King.
Right.
Or like Chicago, like those are like well known, and those have specific costumes that now are associated with that.
Kind of become standards in a sense.
Oh yeah.
Whereas like smaller plays or plays that are less well known, you can fuss a little more and be more unique or more original than try to stick to a certain a certain level of expectation that people are coming in with.
So how much of this play then did the directors and producers have kind of a visual style in mind coming into it, or was a lot of that kind of left up to you and your own research?
A fair amount was left up to me and my research, but like the whole design and production team have been really good about collaborating, like colors and styles and aesthetics and their needs.
Yeah, I would assume you work closely with the set designer.
Yeah, so making sure that the actors will both blend into the world, but not blend in so much that it's like, oh, where are these actual people? That they stick out enough from the set, but it is a cohesive color palette.
Still complementary.
World. Yeah. So it's kind of a back and forth, and that conversation needs to happen throughout, because otherwise you're going to wind up with something at tech and you're like, well, who's going to change? We can't all be wearing the same color and have the set.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah. And so that creates the conversation of, is it easier to change like a shirt than paint the set? But also, what if it's a period show and like, you can't get another dress like that?
Right. Yeah.
So making sure that those conversations happen and happen early is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doing a lot of rehearsals as well to actually see what everything looks like. I could imagine like you're probably sitting in the audience sometimes during a rehearsal just to see what
works, what doesn't.
What works and what doesn't. And it's like, dude, up to the 11th hour, you have the needles in your teeth, like ready to fix something need be. At least that's how it is on film productions that I've been on as well. It's like you're ready to shoot, and it's like, oh, the door's in the wrong place. The camera can't fit. So you're trying to like rush around and figure out something to work. So I could imagine that on stage as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And typically I try to leave the smaller things for that rushing around. So being like, oh, you need a scarf. Here we go. You need a hat. Here you go. But also just being aware that like sitting in a rehearsal and seeing what the actors are doing is also really important. Specifically for movement. I know there's been a time or two that I've gone to a rehearsal, like not too late, but early enough that I'm like, oh, okay. Where I see an actor do something and I'm like, you're wearing a dress. You will not be able to do like the splits.
Yeah.
So like catching that early to know that like
something needs to be altered.
Either I need to change what they're wearing,
or stage direction needs to change.
Yeah, their blocking needs to change.
Right.
That's actually something else. So one thing I'm fascinated with the stage is the unpredictability of it. Like I remember reading stories about like the power will go out and they'll keep performing and they'll just adapt the performance to that, because you can't just say cut.
Yeah. People paid for a show.
Exactly.
And this like, is a special show without lights.
Right. And I love that organic quality, how it's like every performance is different. Like you'll talk to someone who saw the show another night and it's like you'll see like differences. Have you ever had an instance like that where it's like, say a costume accidentally rips or something and it's like, oh, we don't have another one or something? Has there ever been an incident like that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I have
more than one, it sounds.
Yeah, I have done my fair share of safety pinning pants that have ripped clothes, or like sewing on a button real quick. And now even like post-pandemic in a sense, having actors get COVID or get sick and having to like have a swing or somebody else go on for them. So just knowing that like it's gonna change, it's gonna fluctuate.
You do your best to be prepared for whatever may come, but also understand that probably the things that are going to happen you weren't ever going to know you would need to be prepared for.
Yep.
And just,
roll
being
with the
professional
punches.
up to, adapt on the fly.
Yeah. And that's what theater, it's why it's different. It's different every time. And that's the beauty of it. Sometimes that's annoying, but it is what it is.
That's what makes it great too.
It is. Yeah.
Now, do you like working at some of these smaller theaters that are doing, different productions every, month and a half, 2 months? Do you like constantly, moving on to something, or Or do you think it would be fun to have like one show that you would get to work on consistently over the course of like 6 months?
That's a tough one. I think I like the fact that working on this and then letting it go.
Yeah. I feel like it's a little bit more stressful, but you also like, even if there's a show you're maybe not happy with or didn't go how you were hoping or anything, you know, you can kind of just wipe the slate clean and move on to the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I prefer being able to work on it and then letting it go. I feel like sometimes if we worked on it too much, people would get too nitpicky about it and it become kind of too precious. And so that that rolling with the punches wouldn't work because you're like, well, we spent 6 months on this one bodice. Like we need it to always be on and it not rip.
Yeah.
Whereas like working on it for like a month or two, then letting it happen, letting it live, and then saying goodbye to it, putting it away in stock is a good turnaround. So that way you're also not putting it out there and then watching it come back every night ripped or needing repair, and you're like, oh, can't we just say goodbye already? It's a slow death sometimes in theater. Yeah, of a costume piece that is just well loved.
Yeah, I like that.
I like how you put it as well loved instead of well worn.
Both can apply. Whether the actor or costume person loves it, or if it's just really worn.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I know in my profession, both writing and like the actors I've worked with, they do the same thing in their fields. Once they finish a performance, they won't watch the movie. They won't look back on it. They let it go because it's like, that's in the past. I learned what I learned doing it. I don't need to watch myself on a 50-foot screen doing it all again. And I have the same mentality with my writing too. It's like, I like to look back on it and reminisce, but I'll see mistakes and it'll just be like, it is what it is. It had to let it go. You know?
Yeah, there's been shows where I'm like, I'll sit through all of tech, all of dress, and I'm like, all right, I'm good. And then a friend or my family will go and they'll be like, you should come see it with us. I'm like,
I've seen enough of it.
I'm like, okay. And I watch it and I'm like, why am I watching this? This person forgot their handkerchief. They're not wearing this right. Or like they forgot a line. Like
it's just stressful.
I will notice things that others won't, and it's hard sometimes as a theater maker to go watch theater, but especially a show that you've worked on.
Yeah,
because you put some of yourself and your heart into it as well. Like, so it's a very close thing for you at that point. Ooh.
Yeah, shorter moments on the working on things, but I still do enjoy it. Sometimes I do wish I had more time. Mostly just so that I don't like work straight for like
you just mean
7
more
weeks.
times in terms of in between shows when you're like finish one and start prepping for the other, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, we're done with this. Now it's go time.
Yeah.
You just kind of always have to be at 100%.
Yeah. Give me a day or two and then they won't keep going.
You have to unplug from the previous one and then plug into the next one.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
So what's again, don't know how much you can reveal, but with Sanctuary City, like what were some of the, like a little more specifically, I guess, like the color styles you kind of went for, complementing set design, things like that?
Yeah.
Because I have a picture. I would assume you hear Sanctuary City, I think like stained glass. Just I think of like a church or a cathedral. I don't know if that had anything to do with it whatsoever. Like that's the picture that comes to my mind when I think of it. So I think like stained glass colors.
Oh, nice. Well, no, sadly, that's not what came to my mind. I was thinking like city, urban, and a little like grunge.
Okay, that probably makes a lot more sense in context of the play.
But it is also a drama, so it's not going to have bright colors. So my color palette was mostly like relatively dark, but there's still color in there.
Just more muted.
Muted tones.
The 90s style, like you said, the grunge style.
Yeah. While also like putting certain colors in there. So like there is a character who like really wants to be un-American. And so like he's maybe got a red, white, and blue shirt, but it's not like American. It's not like you're not going to see it and be like, that's the American flag.
Right.
But it's still like little
It
pops.
just has those colors there, just kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Like muted or, yeah, okay.
Yeah, little details that if you pick up on it, you do. And if you don't,
Yeah.
it's still
It
a
still
nice
works.
shirt. Yeah. So like going with that color palette, that will also blend in with the set that has two different settings of like a more neutral setting and then a setting with like walls. And then just coordinating the colors of like, it'll all make sense, but it won't, like, neither one should stick out like a sore thumb.
Like how I mentioned lighting earlier, because obviously stage has lighting and sometimes it's experimental. Like if a character's in a mood, it'll be red lighting or something, or they're sad, it's blue. One of the other things I remember learning, and it was like a light bulb moment, but it sounds so stupid in hindsight to not think of it. It's like people of different skin tones have to be lit differently. With costuming, I'm assuming it's the same thing. And since this is a story of undocumented immigrants, they might have darker skin, or you're dealing in an urban environment with people of vastly different skin colors. How does that dictate the costuming as well? Because like how you said, like darker, grungy style, does it fit with like skin tones and such?
Yeah, so it's being aware of your actors too, and I try to also take that into consideration in my design, not only for just like skin color, but also like size of body to make sure that like everything is flattering.
It's interesting for me. Again, it's something I kind of bring up a fair bit in a lot of the other episodes, but you know, I'm much more aurally minded, you know, music. So like when it comes to visuals, like when you and I, John, talk about cinematography and you talk about watching a movie for camera angles, that's something I had never, excuse me, started paying attention to until you mentioned it. I had never I'd never thought about that. And same kind of thing here. Like I had never really considered like color palettes being that crucial. And obviously you don't want it to stick out. You don't want someone who's naive about it to necessarily notice it.
Right.
You know, you want it to fit.
Because it all depends on the visual palette. Like you watch a black and white movie and you don't want too much green, for example, in the movie, because green is unflattering in black and white. And then I think of another film called, I didn't know that until I watched like Schindler's List, and they said they tried to wipe as much green off the sets as possible because it just looked ugly.
Is it just, it's just like a weird shade of gray that's kind of like,
sort of,
I don't even know,
like,
bright or washes out. I don't know.
Exactly. And then like you also get a movie called, what's it called? The Cook, His Wife, Her Lover. Oh no, The Thief, The Cook, His Wife, Her Lover, or something like that. It's like this British film, and it's presented like a stage play. Like the cinematography is always from straight on, like a Wes Anderson film, and the lighting's very evocative. And you would get like these blaringly bright colors for the costumes and the sets, like red as red dress in the finale. You got these people carrying the trains of the dresses around, and it was so clearly staged, but it was all in service to the visual style. And obviously on film, like I could almost say that it could be more extravagant because everything is going for that. Whereas on a stage play, I would imagine it's different somehow. So I don't know where I was going with that, but just to reminisce.
Yeah, no, color. I mean, one of the first things we all talk about as a production is like color palette. What are you doing? What are you doing? What I feel like that's a language that we can all usually relate to is what emotions, feelings, thoughts we have about a color
Right.
and in clothing. Like everybody knows like, oh, a sexy red dress, what that looks like in their head. It could be a different silhouette, but that is
right.
red. If she's wearing a red dress, she's going out.
Putting it out.
She's
Or like red could represent danger or something, or
or like you've got a man in a black trench coat over there, like must be some trouble, like dark brooding. So it's and it sets the mood. Like if you have a bright red room versus like a baby yellow room, like that'll set the tone for the set. And lighting too. If we have like a neutral set, the lighting is where we're going to get those emotions from. is how bright a color is, what angle it's coming at, and how it can change a color too. Like it can change a whole costume. Like if you have a certain color costume and then the lights change, it can look completely different depending.
Never considered that.
Yeah, combinations. The other thing I just randomly thought of, because like how we spoke about Angels in America earlier, part of that show is that I know in the stage directions it actually says it's all right if the wires show. So the artifice is there. You know it's a stage play. And even like Chicago, you know how most of it's in her head. Like there's that scene in the movie, at least I don't know if it's in the stage play, where they're like puppets. If I remember, I don't know if that's done on the stage as well. Like the lawyer's like using her to speak.
Oh yeah, she sits on the lap and pretends.
Yeah,
to be,
but he's like talking through her to tell her like how to get innocent and everything. I guess, is that something you also take into account? Like I'd imagine Sanctuary City is again, I'm not sure how this would be staged, but I'm imagining it's much more grounded. So you don't want the cracks to show. You don't want the seams to show. But in other shows, that's perfectly all right.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sanctuary has like two parts. So the first part is a little more ethereal, a little more like not grounded, actually. It's kind of these blips of life that are happening, maybe not in timeline order. So that is a little more like
dreamlike almost.
Dreamlike. And I do call it a dreamlike part.
Dreamlike state.
Yeah, whereas the other part is definitely like, this is the reality. We are in an apartment. This is what's happening. So for the costumes, I want them grounded through both parts, since they are the only kind of thing grounding us in that first part of like, this is the time period. These are these characters. Whereas like for the second part, I'm less worried about them being the grounding force.
Right, because everything else is kind of doing that already. The plot's already is doing that for you, kind of.
Yeah, the plot setting.
Yeah. But there are other shows that are like, Henry, quiet, sit. There are other shows where it is, for example, like The Play That Goes Wrong. That's a play within a play. So you can be like, this is campy. This is like community theater. So these costumes are costumes.
Yeah.
They're not like things that people actually need to wear that look like people wearing them. They can look like costumes or like have the wire showing or be like, this is a stage. Like we know this is a set. This doesn't have to look like a real place.
So do you have any like desires to ever work on Broadway or in New York or
Yeah, big question. I mean,
I feel like some people like Broadway, it's either, well, I feel like it's probably intimidating for everyone, but I think there's some people where they're just like, no, it's too much, it's too big. I want to stay local community kind of thing. So just curious.
I mean, I'd be open to it, but it's not Broadway or bust for me. I'll be happy to just keep making money, keep surviving, keep making art. In that capacity.
That's what we love to hear.
But like if I get the chance, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the end goal for me.
Right. That's probably a good thing though. I mean, I feel like some people who when Broadway is their goal, I mean, and you know, it's tough to make it and a lot of them do make it, but I feel like that's a rough road to hoe.
Yeah.
Trying to make it there.
Yeah, you got to be incredibly dedicated and sometimes that's okay. And I am a dedicated human, but I do also just want to enjoy life. Yeah. Be happy. Yeah. You know, maybe afford to go out every so often and not just live in a shoebox of an apartment. So we'll see what that means. But as for like future plans and stuff, I know one of the questions was like favorite production or like things that you'd want to do in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, your dream production. Yes.
Yeah.
So like in the future, something that I would love to work on does not have to be Broadway, but just like a new play.
Something that was like recently written that like no one's seen before.
Yeah, no one's done. Yeah, premiere.
That would be fun.
That I could design that like I would kind of be setting the bar, setting that. doing the Lion King or like Hamilton, like no, like these are gonna be the standards that then like go out and go forth. So it doesn't have to be that level. It could still be really small, but just something that we
being
would
the play that
create.
everyone will be basing and comparing it to eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in the little, like, in the script being like, these are the first people who acted in this, and this is the first production team, like original designs by this person.
Yeah.
I'd like that.
Yeah.
And then I'd also just like to have that freedom to work on something crazy.
Yeah.
So
I actually did have one question, but I didn't know how to get it in at any point. Like when you're working on like a musical where there's like, extravagance or something, or the costumes have to do something interesting. How do you work with that? Like if like say a cape has to billow or something like.
Oh yeah. Good questions. I mean, knowing about it before, so making sure that those costumes function how they have to is important. So it's just a matter of like figuring out that function. I know I didn't personally work on this, but I've was part of a team that someone was working on like Cinderella, and so they had the quick change where she like spins and her dress transforms.
Yeah.
So like troubleshooting that earlier on is helpful, and then getting those things to like a rehearsal stage.
Right. And knowing it works before you get to rehearsal instead of making something, getting to rehearsal and figuring out like, oh, it has to do that.
Yeah. Or even like letting that happen and then like getting it into rehearsal early, being like, oh, it is not working how we need it to work. Let's rethink this. So in my time, I've worked on a couple pairs of like wings before. So making sure that asking those questions of like, well, do they need to be like pliable? Do they need to like move billowy, or do you want structure? And if they have structure, this is the kind of structure in the movement that you will have. But just yes. But with like big grand things, knowing that sooner, and then just being like, this is what our budget and time is going to be spent on.
Yeah. Nice. And sorry if I keep coming up with questions.
No, it's great.
So this might sound strange, but again, coming from a film background, how important is the performer's comfort at times? Because I know like on film, again, you're doing like for brief times. I read like stories about how, the guy who wore the Godzilla costume, the costume weighed like almost 100 pounds and it was uncomfortable.
Shit.
Yeah, I know like in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, I read this the other day. Tina Turner has like this silver like chainmail suit at some point in the movie. Yeah. They said it weighed like 121 pounds. And it's like, first of all, good job, Tina Turner. Secondly, how the hell did you stand in that?
Yeah.
But it's like, it couldn't be comfortable. So it's, I guess, again, it might be a dumb question, but how important is the performer's comfort at times when such things are necessary?
Yeah. And I think to answer, yes, the performer's comfort is valued for theater a little more. The difference between film of being like, you can cut, come back, do it a different day. Whereas theater, they are in it for either the long haul or it's a change, but the time that you see them is the time that they are wearing it, and they have to be in it or not.
I would assume comfort does kind of have, is important to some extent because they are acting on stage. You can't just read to a take, and so something uncomfortable taking away from the actor's
the whole
focus.
Time.
Yeah, it takes away from the actor's focus on on their lines or where they have to be on the stage.
Right.
Is important, I would think.
Yeah, it is important, and especially for like musicals or like shows that are like very physically active, like you want to make sure that they're not necessarily restricted or feeling uncomfortable or feeling like they can't do something. Because like Dean said, their mind will then be focused on that rather than like lines or performance. And so you won't get a full performance,
right?
Good performance.
No, Michelle Pfeiffer being ziplocked into her Catwoman suit. Sorry.
That's too much work having to sew somebody into their costume every night.
Oh God.
So
Yeah.
So it is important, and I do when we have fittings with actors and performers, just being like, are you comfortable? Can you do everything you need to? And hoping that they are honest and upfront and being like, yeah, these shoes are a little tight. Like, not wanting them to be like, everything does not work. But wanting them to feel comfortable enough to be like, I can make this work for this time, or being like, I think this is going to be a problem down the line, and letting you know so that
it doesn't get worse.
Yeah, you can
Right.
work with them and make them comfortable. So
I do want to ask one more question before we start wrapping it up. It's kind of a two-parter. So Sanctuary City, how large is the current cast and crew? And then part two, and I only bring this up because I think she's only said the word once or twice this whole time, and in conversations I've had with Jen before, it's something she brings up a lot more often. With the size of your current, I guess, cast in this sense, how many times a week do you have to do laundry?
It's great. It's great.
Because every time I talk to Jen, it's, I was doing laundry today. Oh, I have to do laundry tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's not my laundry I'm doing.
No.
Which makes it much more sad. So the size of Sanctuary City, we have 3 cast members. So yay.
Okay, so it's a very small cast.
Small and
cast
intimate.
compared to like Christmas Story, where we had like 14 people on stage every night, but we had double cast of kids, so that was 21 people in total. I was doing laundry for. Yeah. But this show will be a little easier. It's all modern stuff. Quiet.
Oh yeah, any like dry cleaning needed for the current show or not? No.
No, dry cleaning will either happen at the end. If it happens, we might have some coats that will have to go to the dry cleaners, but not throughout the run.
That's nice.
But we try to do laundry every 2 shows, just so to keep things fresh. But I will also be trying to have like undershirts, things that people wear like against their skin. I'll try and wash that more than what's on the outside, or trying to give them like 2 shirts so that they can wear one night and the other the next night.
And they don't have to reuse them.
Yeah.
Before laundry. Yeah.
Yep. I do a lot of laundry. That's my bad job description, is I do laundry for other people.
Love it. We'd like to take a brief moment to thank you for listening to Storyweavers. For the enjoyment of our listeners, we want to keep this podcast ad-free and uninterrupted.
If you would like to support us further, check out our options on Patreon. Plus, subscribing will get you behind-the-scenes content, bloopers, access to Book of the Month polls, and more. We appreciate any and all support.
Now back to the episode.
So Sanctuary City opens January 18th is the first preview, but opens on January 20th and runs through February 4th. So come out to Bloomsburg Theatre Ensemble. You can get tickets online beforehand and come see us.
Website is bte.org.
Yes. And I believe we have a Facebook page, Instagram. Try and find us. We also they have a podcast that they put out as well. So if you want to hear the actors on their take of Sanctuary City,
cool.
You can go ahead and check that out.
We'll definitely include those links. Definitely.
Hear that rehearsal process. But come out. It'll be really good. And it'll be really entertaining.
Yes.
And
Henry
then
approves.
Henry thinks so, yeah.
And if our listeners want to learn more about you and see some of your work in costumes, where can they go to check that out?
They can check that out on my Instagram, Jennifer Lippert Designs, or at my website, which is very similar, jenniferlippertdesigns.com.
All right. Cool.
Yes. So thank you all for listening, and thank you, Jen, for joining us today and letting us speak with you. It was wonderful.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in and trekking out in the snow. It's coming down a little bit right now.
Oh, it started already? Oh no.
Oh, it was snowing when she showed up. Henry and the other pups were outside running in the snow, but it wasn't sticking to the ground yet, but my guess is it probably is at this point.
I'm sure we've got a half inch or so maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm unfamiliar with this snow thing, but I hope you guys...
You grew up in Connecticut.
I know, I'm being sarcastic. I dealt with more snow than you did, I know.
Yes.
No, once again, thank you for coming on. It was wonderful to speak with you. Wonderful to investigate the costuming side of the stage play and your experiences. And we just want to thank all of our listeners for listening in as well.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Thanks for those listening.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Another great thing we're good with, exits. Thank you for listening to this episode of Storyweavers. As ever, we're incredibly grateful to all of our listeners and contributors. Come back next week for the next installment of Storyweavers.